Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in on this Wednesday. I am pumped. I'm exhausted to tell you the truth. We've had such a busy couple of weeks working on many different things that I'm going to be sharing with you in the next couple of weeks. But people are probably wanting to know what happened with myself being invited to the Doug Ford's breakfast, which heads up, like, thank you to Sean Allen from Matrix Cares for giving me that 9:30 at night, hey, can you be in Mississauga? And I was able to work it, which was amazing and an experience that I will never forget. And hopefully there's going to be many more. But just to give you a little bit of a brief, when you get in there, and there's not just Doug Ford, like there was other MPPs and other investors that were in the room. So definitely getting that synergy and getting the conversation started. They did say that there is some changes happening still, because we just had that bill 227. So there is some changes. We just got to keep holding their feet to the fire, keep pushing ourselves to that roundtable discussion, and most importantly, keep telling you about what's happening and how you can get involved and how you can advocate. Of course, we had a story that's going to be launching, I believe, from CTV. That's happening now next week with a landlord that has now have the arrears of $25,000 in unpaid rent. The tenant is still in the rental unit, and they have denied the eviction, or they delayed the eviction at the landlord and tenant board 3 times, and they also got themselves at the divisional court. So that's where it is. But the tenants did not, upkeep their end of the bargain with their payments, which now leaves the landlord to apply to divisional court to have that motion appealed, which they're now taking 2 months to get back to the landlord. So working with that landlord, trying to get his stay lifted. But these are stories that are happening more frequently, and we need to be having these discussions publicly and letting everybody know. And this is why I've wanted Mario Armani, who is a realtor for the last 19 years, obviously years of experience being a landlord himself, and we're going to come on and try to talk about these nightmare stories, but we're also going to talk about ways to pinpoint out, how to avoid these nightmare stories, or when you are going through a nightmare story, how do you handle it? I know a lot of landlords are very our passion, our emotion, everything is tied to our rental properties. And I know from speaking with landlords for the last 15 years, we got to learn how to calm ourselves, analyze the situation, know how to deal with that situation, and then learn from it so that you can avoid it for the next one. So Mario, thank you so much for coming on a Wednesday. I have you for, hopefully an hour. So hold with us, guys. And I wanted to give everybody a little bit of a background of who you are. So the floor is yours.
So first of all, if you were invited to the Doug Ford party, why didn't you invite me?
It was so quick. It was so quick. But don't worry. We have a roundtable discussion
Awesome.
happening in Queens Park on April 28th to the 29th. So make sure you just go onto the Ontario Landlords Watch Facebook page. All the details are in there for you to register. And we need as many landlords and property managers, real estate agents, and paralegals there, because this is I think it's a do or die. I think it's a do or die situation.
I really would agree with you. I think that there's a big narrative amongst landlords and tenants where a lot of tenants, basically, it's almost like, too bad, so sad for the landlord. The landlord has all this money. They're rich, and it doesn't matter if they can afford it if we don't pay them rent. And it's definitely not the case. The majority and the average landlord, they're just, a person that saved a little bit of extra money. They were able to buy an investment property. They're trying to make a small difference for the future of their family. And the reality is that a lot of these landlords shouldn't be landlords because they can't really afford it if their tenants don't pay, right? So obviously a lot of things have changed with the pandemic, and a lot of people purchase properties. They attain them with low interest rates. Their monthly payments have skyrocketed. People are not covering their payments, right? So now when a tenant goes off and doesn't pay, just creates a very, very big problem down the pipeline.
Oh, and you know what? And this is not, you know it, I know it, the government knows it. And now like the city of Bradford, they now know it. They are actually in the news calling upon the province to make these rules to be fair, because they're trying to exercise these mandates of trying to create additional units to properties, and they know the landlords don't want to create secondary suites because of the way that the Residential and Tenancy Act and the Landlord and Tenant Board is. So now they're like, hey, province, like you need to do something here. Like these landlords need to seek justice, especially for these bad faith tenants who are deciding to not pay rent and to pay rent on time, because they are going through the process. They know the loopholes. And this is why a big part of my advocacy is to telling these landlords to report the debt to Front Lobby. They share that debt with Equifax, they share it with Landlord Credit Bureau. We see all these sites where you can post the order, which is already too late. You can post the orders on those websites, but I'm seeing that there is a bit of a little question that I worry about, because when you post those orders, it doesn't come with the tenant's birth date. So now we're seeing like people on those sites and saying, hey, I found two people with the same name that are on the site. Like, is that the same person that I'm dealing with? So this is where it kind of alleviates that kind of confusion, and trying to get these landlords to report to the credit bureaus, where you can see the tenant's name, you can see their birth date, and you can see a very current and up-to-date debt. Because a lot of I've seen a post online where the tenant paid the debt, but now this order is now on these sites and it's impacting them. So making sure that everyone knows about these different type of tools, and this is going to help us, as we're doing our tenant screening, because tenant screening is the key to try to avoid these nightmares that are happening, and they're going to happen more frequently, especially if everyone's paying attention to the news right now.
It definitely is. I think that you have a much greater chance of success if you screen your tenants properly. Now, a lot of the times that doesn't happen. Whether, as an example, let's say a lot of people don't want to use a real estate agent because they feel, well, we don't want to have to pay that 1 month's commission to the real estate agents because we can do it ourselves. But then they don't ask the right questions. They don't screen the tenant properly. Then they get in trouble. Then on the other token, they hire a real estate agent. However, because real estate agents do not make that much money when it comes to leases, a lot of the realtors who do them are brand new realtors who also don't know how to properly screen these tenants, and they also get the landlord in trouble anyways, right? So no matter which way you cut it, there is a lot of problems that can occur from that kind of vetting process. But ultimately, I still feel that the problem stems from the top, where there needs to be rules in place. And I look at things from both perspectives. So when I look at it from the perspective of the tenant, yes, I understand tenants. For all the tenants that are watching, there's a lot of landlords that are scumbags, that don't fix properties, that don't do things. When you call them, they don't help. There's a lot of issues wrong with the home. I get it. But when it comes from the landlord side, the money needs to be there. If you don't pay for something, whether you go to a store, whether you go anywhere, if you don't pay for it, it is stealing. So if you are not paying your rent, it is literally theft. And why it's not being treated as such, I have no idea. And I just think that people have, in this particular case, I feel that tenants have way too many rights.
Oh, and that's the thing. If at $50 in gas, you're being charged with theft, and people are getting away with $50,000. And you know what's sad and unfortunate about the story with the CTV is that these tenants that are not paying rent work in the healthcare department in the hospital. They drive these nice cars, and they have not paid a single dollar in a year for their rental rate. And and I don't know if they know that, yes, like it's eventually going to get caught up with them. And I don't know if they're planning to get a house built with, the money that they're saving, but there is a lot of people that are just exploiting the system. And there is people who are just, down and out for the count and not able to pay their rent. But there is people online trying to think that landlords are hoarding these rental units. And if we just got rid of the landlords, we're going to see the market kind of correct itself. And I'm like, not all tenants can be homeowners. There is criteria to become a homeowner, and the fact still remains that we still have a supply issue right across the country. And now with the tariffs coming in, it's going to even be harder for us to get anything built.
You hit the nail on the head, Kayla. I agree 100% that, like, I have very well-to-do clients that, as an example, combined income, they make $500,000 a year. and they don't own a home. They rent just because they like to move around. They don't like to stay in the same place for, more than a couple of years. They also, because they work from home, they've, let's say, continued renting their place and they've moved abroad for 6 months. You know what I mean? Not everybody could own a home. Not everybody wants to own a home. And I think that a lot of tenants, they kind of say, well, too bad for the landlord. I don't care. If the landlord loses the property, then there will be more properties available for people to potentially buy. But the reality is that these tenants think that all of a sudden prices are going to go from $1 million to 500,000. And that, first of all, that's not going to happen. And secondly, the less rentals there are, guess what's going to happen? Easily. So laws of supply and demand. The less there is of something, the more it's going to cost. So if there's less rentals available, rentals will cost more money.
Yeah. And this is why you're going to see, like, everyone knows a lot about this stuff. And this is why we have these professional tenants that know they're getting away with murder. Like, they're able, and this is where it gets a little confusing, because a landlord would give a tenant, a non-payment rent application, and then they worry that their place is going to be damaged, because now you have to take them to the landlord and tenant board now on a different application. And now it's on damages. You can't just call the police and say, hey, here's my before pictures of what my property looked like, and now this is what it looks like now with these tenants. So this is where I would hope that we can get our, because we're hearing stories of the tenant, they had smashed the kitchen cupboards. Like, how much is a kitchen? That's quite crazy there, even for drywall, and having that done by a repair person, if it's a whole sheet or if it's a couple. And then they just have the garbage that gets accumulated, and then the city involved, and now telling the city, like, hey, you're going to be we're going to fine you, or we're going to come and clean it and put it to your property taxes if you don't come and deal with this. So we're almost like glorified babysitters, I would say.
There's so much. Like, I had a tenant in one of my rental properties that basically, for some reason or another, when he stopped paying rent, he also refused to cut the grass. So now, you let the grass go for 3 or 4 weeks. You have a nosy neighbor complaining, and the city gives you, a warning. Then you have to send somebody there to get it cut, or you have to go there to get it cut. I remember the first time I showed up there to cut the grass, just because the gentleman that I called to cut it wasn't available. He canceled on me last minute, so I had to go, and the tenant wouldn't let me let me on the property. And long story short, I had to call the police. The police came. It was a big ordeal. All the neighbors were outside of the house. You know what I mean? And I was like, officer, listen, like, here's my notice from the city. He's the tenant. He's not cutting the grass. I have to cut the grass. You know what I mean? Technically, he has to do it. I explained the situation, and I got really lucky that the police officer was extremely understanding. But, things could have gone anyway, right? So it's just unfortunate that this is happening, because it's something that shouldn't happen. And again, we can blame landlords, we can blame tenants, we can blame anybody, but the reality is we need to blame who is in power, because the people that are in power, they're the ones who will allow or not allow people to get away with things. So apart from the many landlords that unfortunately have contacted me over the course of the last 3 or 4 years with tenant issues, I actually feel bad, because this system, believe it or not, Kayla, and I think you would agree with me, it's actually hurting a lot of tenants, not necessarily landlords. And why I say that is because a lot of tenants personally reach out to us, being realtors, and they say, hey, we're looking to find a place. So once we start gathering their paperwork, we get their credit report. Some of them work, let's say, self-employed jobs, or they own their own business. They don't report all their income. On paper, they do not look like good tenants. So if we send their paperwork over to a landlord, the landlord's going to immediately deny them. Meanwhile, these people are fantastic, and all they need is a little bit of a chance. And unfortunately, a landlord with today's rules cannot give those people a chance, because a landlord can't kick them out once they're in the unit. So these are the people that I feel bad for. I feel bad for these tenants that can't get into a place just because these old bureaucratic rules are in place that just make no sense.
Oh, you've hit it dead on the nose right there, is that we can't. And just like we've been telling the elected officials, is that the number one people that is what's going through the market right now, if anybody's on fixed income, they are being denied because it takes so long to evict a tenant. If you were able to do a quick eviction between like 30 maximum 60 days and legit 60 days, we could see ourselves, taking those risks on those tenants again back in the day.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the way that the system has been so broken, and I'm not too sure if it's even done by design right now, just because they know we're not getting the supply that's needed. And they know that government and the nonprofits are struggling. They can't even get the money from grants from the municipalities. Like, this is the struggle that we're seeing. And this is why it's a multifaceted issue. And that's why they need their private investors to work with them. And we're telling you, like, this is what is needed. And you know what? You go back to your situation with the grass cutting, right? Number one, what I would like back in COVID days, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot to get this, part of the application signed. Is it okay if I swing by your property? Right. And this is where like, oh yeah, sure, no problem. Or it's like, actually, I can come to you. You're going to start to like, fill out if they don't want you at their rental property, first and foremost. And the other side of it is that the liberal government creating the standard lease. And then you have multiple levels of government having a fixed lease versus month to month. And in Ontario, unfortunately, our yearly leases go to month, not like Alberta. And I think if Ontario adapted the way that Alberta did, where you can legitly sign on for another year with that tenant, and if you don't, and you don't indicate that you want to, not rent to them anymore, then it will go month to month. But this is where it all kind of makes sense to say, do I still want to continue working with you as my tenant? And I think a lot more people, knowing that they had an out, would probably take the chance on those high risk tenants
Of
if
course.
we knew that we would have to just deal with you for a minimum of a year. That's if you didn't do something which is non-payment of rent.
I think no matter what, the money needs to be there. I think that there's always a little bit of a grace period. To me, the grace period should be no more than 30 days. So if you don't pay your rent, you have 30 days to come up with your rent, because guess what? If you don't pay it in 30 days, now you owe 2 months. You don't just owe 1 month, right? So I wouldn't even extend it past that time, because I feel that in these particular cases, the more leeway you give somebody, the more they take, right?
Oh,
So
yes.
it's just very unfortunate. But like I said about 3 or 4 minutes ago, it all stems from the top. If these rules were in place, it would protect everybody. It would protect landlords. It would protect tenants. And the reality of the matter is that there are so many investors that over the course of the last year to 2 years, they've completely pulled out of the market. They've sold their rental properties. They've even gone off to say, I will never, ever own a rental property ever again. And that's terrible, because now you have people that are not renting. And that's very bad for tenants, because that means less rentals available for them.
Oh, it's through COVID when they did an eviction ban. That's when we started seeing like a mass exodus of landlords getting out of the industry, when they seen how government can tell you that you can't kick out any tenant. And now we're seeing municipal government, a lot of them doing rent eviction bylaws, which really impact the landlord's ability to make the place look nice. Do a refinance on that property, pull the money out, and continue to keep investing. So a lot of it is starting to become almost just sound bites that elected officials are using. And we keep telling our elected officials at the provincial level, at the municipal level, stay in your own lane. These rent evictions, like, there's laws in place at the provincial level that is, to make sure that these tenants are not being evicted in bad faith. And if they are, they have up to 2 years to go and bring the landlord back to the courts, where they could get fined $50,000 as an individual, and a lot higher for a corporation. And tenants are obviously granted some money as well because of it, if the landlord is caught doing bad faith evictions. So again, though, why is the landlord and tenant board, handling a full-on hearing for personal use applications? Like, this is probably holding up a lot of sales, because the property is tenanted, which leads into landlords keeping the place empty until that market, where they do want to post it for sale.
And that's actually been another problem. And I'm glad you touched on it, because there's a lot of homeowners that are landlords that are selling rental properties. And I've particularly had a few clients that really wanted to purchase a specific property, but they haven't been able to, for the sheer fact that the tenant wouldn't leave. And we had no guarantee that the tenant was going to leave. We actually had one tenant that said to us, "We're not leaving. We're going to make it impossible for the seller to go ahead and basically sell the property." And unfortunately, this poor seller, they were in the red. They were going to lose the property to the bank, and the bank ended up taking over in a power of sale just because these scumbag tenants, and I'm going to call them scumbag tenants,
Yeah.
wouldn't leave the property.
Mario, I had he was a landlord slash real estate agent, gave the tenant an N12 application for the new owner to move in. But because the landlord had the lease in a corporation, he was denied the vacant unit based on the fact that it was in a corporation. So because it was sold firm, the landlord slash realtor was forced to make an agreement for $100,000 to buy the tenant out for them to move out. And I
It's
seen
legal
it like,
extortion. It's legal extortion.
better yet, like it definitely is extortion, but is the government, this is a good question. And guys, in the comments, for anyone's watching live or on a repeat, if you are, a government official and you're controlling how landlords gain access to their properties, are they expropriating your land and using your property for public use? Especially with Section 83. If Section 83, if the tenant has, any disabilities, or they're going to be homeless and they can delay or refuse an eviction, could that, is that the government, expropriating your land for public use? And that's where it's always been, to the point where it's like, it's my property. You're forcing me to, rent to people who've, obviously not paying rent, causing damage, putting, the fear into people. How is this even continuing, and why is it getting worse?
I just don't know where it's going to end. And it's not an issue that has just started. It's something that's been ongoing for many, many years. It continues to get worse now with the power of the media, social media. A lot more people are talking about it, but I still don't see the action. So these are why the government is also not, I'm not saying that they should protect landlords exclusively, because there are landlords, which I do feel that this is incorrect. And I do kind of side with the tenants here. Sometimes my landlords will say, well, this isn't fair because we bought the property, we pay taxes, we do this, we do that. We're keeping everything afloat by owning these properties. These tenants wouldn't have a place to live if it wasn't for us. So screw the tenants. And I disagree with that, because it needs to be fair. And that's my biggest problem with all this, is that it's just too one-sided. It's fair right now for the landlord, but it's completely unfair for the tenant, but it's completely unfair for the landlord. And that's where I kind of have an issue as to why the government isn't stepping in. Something as simple as, again, you don't pay for 30 days, you can file for immediate eviction with a sheriff, and that's it. Like, why do we need to go to court so you can explain to me why you can't pay? Why you can't pay shouldn't matter. You fell, you broke your leg, you have an illness, whatever the case may be. I'm so sorry, but you did not pay. You must vacate the premises. Simple. The money needs to be there.
Mario, why is it taking 3 hours to go through a hearing to state why they can't pay? That's what, like, you think that they look at the timelines right now at the Landlord and Tenant Board, and they're patting themselves on the back because they took it from 12 months and they brought it down between 4 to 8 months. It all depends on what area you're looking at and if a tenant is appealing any type of judgments. But why is it still taking 3 hours to justify that? They do have rent relief programs for people who are struggling, and they can, tap into that. So there should be more of a faster way of having, and they did that. They did a bit of a change. I will give them credit, where a landlord and the tenant can say, let's work at a payment plan. I can file that payment plan. If you don't follow through with that payment plan, then I can apply to the Landlord and Tenant Board for an eviction. But the tenant can still apply for a stay. So that means there's got to be another hearing because the tenant had applied for the stay. And they go on order was granted without hearing. So really you made that change, which is great. It really encourages the tenant to make a payment arrangement, but some of the paralegals who support the tenants are telling the tenants, don't do any payment arrangement, wait until you get to the landlord and tenant board, because they'll do a payment arrangement.
Yes.
And then the kangaroo court system continues.
I was about to say, to me, those are just nothing more than Band-Aid solutions to make it look like you're doing something when in reality you're doing nothing.
It's a Band-Aid on a bullet wound.
Yeah. I've had a lot of landlords that I work with that they've actually tried to make a payment plan with the tenants. The tenants, without even getting consultation from their paralegals or lawyers, have directly denied us. So that it wasn't possible. And then it's just a situation where, like you said, they're even getting advice from the professional, because at the end of the day, the professional will work for them, not for the landlord, not to do something. So the system is in place for the system to be able to be taken advantage of. And listen, it's not just necessarily this situation with the landlord and tenant board. We're seeing it now with criminals, you know what I mean? And like just petty car thefts, you know what I mean? Where, or just robberies where, you know, they get charged today, the next day they're out and they're committing the same crimes within days. You know what I mean? We allow this. People will continue to do it. That's the reality.
No, and you know what? There was a family member that I was helping, and they had another member of a family member who got to steal $175,000 because they created an online account with TD Bank, guys, by the way, TD. And this is where they had to go back and forth to court every single month. They adjourned it. They went back. They adjourned it. Took 2 years. And then the individual pleaded guilty. And because majority of it was done in youth, they said $500 every month for 2 years. The tenant or that individual stopped paying that $500 every month. But his probation officer, like, what are you going to do? You're going to arrest him? You're going to put him in jail? Like the way that they're handling criminal activity in this province, and I'm thinking all of Canada, and I could probably like start to agree with Trump at times. You do want to question the type of. So if I see someone who has that mindset of common sense, who is running in any level of government, let me know. I want to back you. I want to support you, because I think we need that. And we need people who are really for the people and not just looking for sound bites and looking just to protect their own rear end and get themselves a nice cushy little salary.
So Canada's always been a country of a lot of rights. I think it's a very positive thing in certain occasions. And again, lately, I just feel like we're going completely the other way, where we're giving way too many people a lot of consideration that they just shouldn't get. Sticking to this landlord and tenant board issue, why I'm so anal about all these things that are happening is because I truly feel that we are hurting the investor, and ultimately that will hurt the tenant. So once again, tenants are not thinking about the big picture. They're just thinking of, I don't care. Screw you. You're rich. I'm not. Too bad, so sad. But ultimately, it's hurting tenants as a whole, right? So I don't know why these changes are taking such a long time to basically execute, but ultimately, people's lives are getting ruined. And the excuse that people have are, well, they knew the risks that they were getting into once they got into it. And yes, I understand, you know what I mean, that anything can happen. You can lose your job. Well, you cannot have a rental property. It could be a principal residence, and you can lose your job, and you might not be able to pay for your mortgage. And even with the mortgage, realistically speaking, within 6 to 8 months, give or take, a bank could basically force a sale. So, if you don't pay your bank, they're going to repossess your house. They're going to put your house on the market. They're going to get rid of it. But why is it that now, as a tenant, you're able to stay into a property a year, 2 years without paying anything? It just doesn't make any sense.
Mary, I just sat at the table that I was at for Doug Ford, and there was a lawyer there, and he was actually telling me that it took 18 months to foreclose on a property because the homeowner bought it.
Wow.
So like people are even dragging out that process now because they know they can. And we're seeing articles regarding people, going in severe debt, missing their payments and mortgages, missing their rent payments. This is what I think we're all prepared. And I've never really believed in like rental guarantee programs. until today, watching these tariffs, watching the risk and what's happening, I think we have to start looking a little further into what these rental guarantee programs look like in the fine print. I think it's very important for the fine print, but I think we have some serious troubling times ahead. And I think these landlords need to watch out for the type of tenants that are going to be taking advantage of these dark times. And what would you say, Mario, is going to be like your indicator that you have a professional tenant like knocking on your door, especially as a realtor? Sometimes they feel desperate and they think that if a realtor is going to back them, I'd be like, oh, they got a realtor, I would look at them a little bit more. What would be your red flags?
So right away, something that I've noticed over the course of the last year and a half, a lot of these, even if they're not professional tenants, I noticed that the fraud in terms of paperwork, it's getting even worse. And you have to be very, very careful, because if you're not really experienced to look for certain things, there's paperwork that I've been given, which if you don't look at it twice, you think it's real. Like the forgeries are getting extremely, extremely good, and you got to be very, very careful. I think it's very important to go ahead, let's say, and follow up with HR, those kind of things. There's a lot of back and forth. So how things were done with real estate agents, like let's say 3 or 4 years ago, deals happened a lot quicker on the rental side. Now, I for example, over the course of this year, 2025, I've actually personally represented 3 tenants. And it's been very difficult because landlords now, they're realtors, they're scrutinizing everything. Like, I mean, everything. I recently had a situation where this tenant of mine, amazing tenant, she would be basically any landlord's dream, had over 1.2 million sitting in the bank, was willing to pay for 6 months in advance, had an extremely well-paying job that she's been working at for 20 years, making about $88,000 a year. And she was looking to rent out a $3,200 apartment, and they were giving her problems. They wouldn't, they were saying, oh no, her income is a little bit too low. And can she do this? Can she do that? And they were literally asking everything. And she even said to me, she goes, Mario, I feel like a criminal.
Was she by herself?
Two older kids.
So she pretty much like a single. So we're looking at single income, and people are
single income, still a good income, but it's like I said. So her idea was to basically live somewhere for a year to 2 years, and then after that, purchase a property, and she would buy it in cash at that point, right? So like I said to multiple landlords, realtors that denied us, I'm like, well, if the tenant wanted to, she can pay the rent for the next 5 years in advance, and it wouldn't be an issue. Like, she's looking to stay here 1 to 2 years. Would you like 2 years in advance? She's happy to pay you 2 years in advance because she has the money sitting in the account. No, we're not interested.
In the landlord's head, we're thinking, was this tenant extorting another landlord, right? Like, that's the broken system now, where that person, which is, it's a good income, but it's a single income. And then landlords are now worried, like, what if you, a medical reason, or what if you lost your job? Now, who else is going to be able to pay the rent? And that is what we're seeing is even happening.
So it's even sadder for a tenant like that, because obviously if her credentials were very poor, she didn't have any savings, she had, bad credit, all that, she had no references, you can kind of understand why a landlord would say no. But in this particular case, she was just like to the point where there were several times where she was even crying because she's like, I'm not going to find a place. And I'm like, listen, you will find a place. It's just, this is how it is. And I kind of, every time I work with a tenant now, I warn them and I say, hey, listen, this is how it is. Like, be prepared, because they're gonna want to know everything and more. They're gonna follow up with all your references. Like, I do not show any tenants anything unless I have all paperwork. Like, I need as much paperwork as possible to prove to the landlord that that tenant is awesome. And I always say to the tenants, it's almost like, think of it as I'm your lawyer and I'm trying to get you out of jail. Yeah. I need the ammunition, right? Give me the paperwork. I need all the information to basically prove to the landlord that you are a good person and you're going to pay them on time.
Yeah. See, and what I've also would like to let our landlords and our following know is that when you are doing the screening and you see the application, please get a copy of the tenant's ID. There is tenants out there who are filling out the application in someone else's name, to making it look like they are the person. So please make sure that you're getting the ID, matching that to the credit report. Always conduct your own credit report on these tenants. Never accept.
I was just going to mention that to please get your own credit report. It's unbelievable how much fraud. Photoshop is free nowadays. People can Photoshop good credit reports with their names on it, and there's no way that you can possibly tell. This is again when you have a good realtor to help you out, and they're going to spot red flags. And even though the paperwork, I look at the paperwork, but it's also the questions that you ask the tenants once you're talking to them, meeting them in person before. Like, even though you're dealing with another real estate agent, you should still, as a landlord and as a realtor, meet these tenants in person before you agree to have them as your tenants. There's been countless times where you see them on paper, they're amazing. You talk to the realtor, he's great. You meet the tenants in person, and as soon as you talk to them for 5 minutes, you're like, whoa, there's no way that I can have this person in my house, right?
And it's not just finances, right? I think it's about connecting. I think it's a
Yes.
business relationship that we're working with. That's why we have to meet with them. It's like, one is the credential of if you can afford the place. The other one is making sure that you're going to get along with everyone here. You're going to get along with the landlord. And that's where it's like that first question that you ask the tenant is like, why are you moving? I
Yes.
think really it's an open question that you get to find out, like, what do you feel on the asking tenants that question?
Um, usually what I've come across over the last couple of years, oh, well, the landlord's selling the house, we're getting a separation, we changed jobs, we're moving to another location. I don't really find too much fraud when it comes to that. I also
check, though. You can, so if they said that the landlord is selling the place, you can actually check.
Yes. Where I find more of a problem is people lying in terms of, yeah, well, it's going to be me and this person in the property. And then all of a sudden you find out that they're bringing in like 7 or 8 different people.
Yeah.
Or people, let's say, putting other people who are not going to live in the property in their application because they just want you to approve them, right? So these are the little bit of the issues that we're kind of having. Again, I strongly suggest, if you're if you're a landlord and you're watching this program right now, you need somebody with a lot of experience to help you navigate this. If you're hiring a realtor, try to hire a realtor, and this is going to be a tough thing because realtors that are very good, a lot of them do not want to take rentals. So in my particular case, and just being transparent, I don't want to take on rentals, but I take them on anyways because, again, these are clients of mine that they purchased these properties with me. They've sold properties with me. And it's almost like, how can I say as a professional, I'm going to help you on the transactions where I get paid more and on the transactions where I get paid less. Now I'm not going to help you. I think it's completely unethical and I would never do that to somebody, right? So I still give them that same level of service doing the rental as I would on a purchase or a sale or anything like that.
Oh yeah, and you get the personality for it too, so you have to do it. So you got to help them out. I know when I'm asking the tenants, like when the first thing when they start complaining about their last landlord, and I'm like, oh no, really?
Yeah.
What did he do? What an asshole. Landlords like that make us look bad. And then you
Yeah.
can start to like read between the lines that they're just a difficult tenant and they're being evicted. Right? I've
Yeah.
had tenants come to me and tell me they're being evicted. Like, that's how like casual you can be, right? And you need to. It's like you're almost like an acting, but you have to get yourself into that mindset of like, ease a little bit, not make it so like an interview for a job, but try to interview them as your friend to
Yeah.
find out if they're going to be compatible to you or the tenants that are in the rental property.
I don't know if this has been your experience, but I would say that probably 20% of all the tenants that I've vetted personally, so not going through a realtor where I'm speaking directly to the tenant, I would say 1 out of 5 directly compromises themselves without me even having to ask them anything. They'll either tell me something where, like you said, they got evicted, or, they're having a hard time with work, and, just reasons where you would say, there's no way in hell that I'm taking you on as a tenant. Like, this is like a major red flag, oh, my husband, he's on probation, or just, things that where you're kind of like super iffy about it. Right. So
Yeah.
it's pretty scary.
And it is scary, and you don't need to, try to meddle into someone's like living, because some tenants are just like, listen, I just want you to know that I can pay my bills, right? And
Yeah.
that's all you need to know. It's like, no, we need to make sure that we're keeping the reasonable enjoyment to the tenants there, so are we going to have these type of issues? Some people are like paying in a band. I'm like, do you play at home? Like, these are like just little things that you want to
Yeah.
make sure that you're getting the right fit to the tenants. But again, I think we're looking at, even the credit check in itself, you're going to line that up based on like talking to the tenants, finding out where they live, like, oh, really? Where is that? And you're getting their address. Then they're writing down the address on the application. And then when you do the credit check's not coming up as that address,
Yes.
right? So now you're able to put the pieces together. Then you're looking at, how good are you paying your bills, with your cell phone bill, your phone bill, did you have a mortgage, that you had? And some people are
Kayla, I have a big one, like
uh,
a very, very big one. And I'm sure you're going to agree with this one. Social media. Check their social media. So many times you'll literally go on Facebook or you'll just Google their name and you find things out about them. And it happens all the time where you can kind of dig in and do a little bit of research on them and you actually see very negative things on them. So I found that doing a little bit of homework on social media goes a very long way.
I've done a credit check and it actually popped up links with the person's name, and you have to like read it because it's like, okay, this is the different address or just a different nationality, but it literally pulled up an area of where there was some criminal activity that was happening.
Oh,
You're like,
wow.
wow. I'm like, a little scared. I'm gonna back away 10 feet. But that is something where social media, I zoom up on coffee tables. I've had a tenant who wrote down on the application they didn't have a pet. You're checking them out on social media, you're seeing them, wrapped up with Bruno, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh, hey, I just had a question for you. Did you say you had an animal? Well, I was going to be talking to my family about taking the family pet. And I'm like, like, of course, you can't discriminate against the fact that they're bringing in a pet. But if
Yes.
you do have some allergies for other tenants there, that's where you dive a little deeper to make sure. And then you're very strict, say, hey, we don't allow the dogs on the grass, have to take them for a walk because we don't want to deal with dog feces on the property, ruining the enjoyment of others. But most important, that dog feces is like an attraction to rodents. And I don't want to have rodent problems at my property, right? So that's where you start leading into why people have trouble with pets, not of course the given of the landlord's not taking care of the animal and then the animal becoming a nuisance. But it sucks because normally we would deal with it, we would talk to you about it, we'll go through it, but we are waiting a long time for justice at the landlord and tenant board. And that's why we have to consider what we're talking about for red flags. That's why we're
So
considering it.
what I don't understand is where do we go from here? Because there's a slew of problems that can potentially happen. A few years back, I had a landlord who unfortunately was not in a good place financially, and his tenant wasn't paying him for 6 months.
Mm.
And there was an altercation with the tenant. And obviously, nobody got killed or anything like that. But the landlord, unfortunately, they called the police on him. He got arrested. And these are the things that happen. But eventually, especially during these very, very hard economical times, what's to say that you might not have you might have a landlord that'll just go crazy one day and blow a tenant's brains out? It could definitely happen. You know what I mean? Something can ensue where there's a problem, and I kind of feel there's enough proof and there's enough evidence so far where tenants are abusing the system. We know that tenants are abusing the system. And again, I'm not blaming tenants because even though it is their fault, they are going to do what they're allowed to do. Technically, they're breaking the law, but they're also following the other law in terms of, getting kicked out. So they're breaking it and also following it at the same time. And of course, we cannot go to the tenant's house with a baseball bat and go crazy. So what has to happen for change to occur? That's what I want to know. How do we like, despite all of these great technologies, obviously you're an ambassador for Front Lobby. I've recently become an ambassador for Front Lobby, and I really vouch for the company because they do offer a lot of great things. And if I was a landlord, I would definitely sign up with them, and not because I'm an ambassador, because there's a lot of tools that they offer to help protect my investment. And that's the most important thing, especially because the fact of being a member is relatively cheap. It's $240 plus HST per year. It's obviously a write-off at that point as well. To have a service that helps you for such a minimal amount of money is awesome. But, at the end of the day, as a landlord, as an investor, these investors want to get paid. We want those investors to continue making money so they continue to invest, because the reality is we will need rental properties. Even though inventory might go up, which I don't see there being enough construction to facilitate the amount of demand that we will require in Canada over the next, let's say, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Yep. We will still need rentals, because guess what? Real estate is only going to become a lot more expensive in 10 years, even though people think that the market's going to crash or whatever the case may be. In 10 years from now, the real estate price will be more expensive than it is today. It might go down for 2 or 3 years. It might go up, but in 10 years, we can obviously agree it'll be more expensive. So why are we not going to protect everybody as a whole? And in order to protect everybody, something has to be done so the system cannot be getting abused. Landlords aren't getting abused. Tenants aren't getting abused. The system in reality is what's getting abused.
It needs an overhaul. And I think that's where a lot of elected officials at that municipal level now are coming up. There's different organizations coming out and saying the exact same thing. And when you actually talk about front lobby and you have someone that has that professional tenant, they don't care about their credit. They don't care. They already have crappy credit because they gave me a fraudulent one. Then it's not about impacting the tenant's credit. It's about informing your other colleagues. It's about informing the community to hold them accountable, because they will be looking for other accommodations. And there is a 10-year waiting list in the region of Waterloo, and there is a 22-year wait list for housing in Mississauga. So you're going to see that you do need the private sector to kind of help you. And when you talk about what we can be doing, and this is what I've been doing. So I have one, you're getting with your MPP, you're communicating with the MPP. We need to communicate with Doug Downey. Doug Downey is the Attorney General. He oversees the Landlord and Tenant Board. He has stockpiled, adjudicators, but it's still the process that's the problem. We need to be getting our message to Doug Downey, the Attorney General. I have a petition. I can post it here in the links in the videos. It's calling for his resignation. He's been in power since 2018. We have been giving him recommendations through his staff and meeting with the staff, and they're still slowly introducing these tiny little changes that are not going to really impact bringing justice to both parties. We have a new Minister of Housing. Yes, there's going to be some changes there with Paul Calandra, trying to get to Paul Calandra. But we have to get yourselves embedded with our elected officials at the municipal level as well, because they are being vocal at that provincial level. So get yourself on any type of housing committees. I sit on the Affordable Housing Reserve Working Group. I'm on a water billing task force. Having your voice and your experience as a landlord to your elected officials, no matter what level it is, it's going to be important. And I am, hopefully with Mario, we're working on something where landlords can come out and speak their mind without their face. We'll leave it at that. Without their
I would want, there's only one question that I would want answered from, let's say, the fat cats above us. Why is it that it would take a long time to approve a rule, as an example, where it would be mandatory that a tenant would have to pay within 30 to 60 days? Why is that something that would take, let's say, years to pass that kind of a bylaw or rule? Why? I don't get it. For what reason?
I don't know. I think we're going to look at all the billions of people that are on OW and ODSP and how they have gotten an increase. The rents have obviously went up, and they're not going to be able to afford their rent. And so they worry about an influx of people being evicted and becoming a part of the tent encampments. We're looking at tents. We are looking at shipping containers. I think we've gone backwards trying to go ahead with, modernizing the way our housing crisis and getting better. We're going backwards. And I'm not quite why, when their goal was to always work with nonprofit housing providers, and I can see them struggling unless they're getting that free land. And there's different programs out there now to say, if you are a current nonprofit housing provider, is that they're going to alleviate you from property taxes if you sign on for another 20 to 25 years of providing affordable rents. And it's a non-sustainable system of what they've created.
And it is non-sustainable for the simple fact that, listen, everything's gone up. Like in this particular case, rents over the course of the last 6 months have gone down. However, landlords are continuing to pay their mortgage, and they have to pay for it. And now, like, I know for a fact, because a lot of landlords have reached out to me saying, hey, listen, do you know a good mortgage broker? I need to refinance the rental property because I can't make ends meet, and if I don't figure something out, we got to put the property on the market. So landlords, they have to make their adjustments, and if they can't keep the property, guess what? They have to sell, or else they'll be sent to power of sale. So what difference is there for the tenants? I understand that housing is a right, food is a right, but that doesn't mean that the government has to give it to you.
Housing or shelter?
Shelter. Good,
Ah,
good call. Very good call. And again, I hope that nobody misunderstands me for being a jerk, or they're going to say, this guy, he doesn't know what it's like. And well, listen, ultimately, I do know what it's like, because my family, being an immigrant, we struggled a lot. We never lived in lavish homes or anything along those lines. My parents were always very hardworking people. We came here and we lived in a 1-bedroom flat.
I was in government housing as a child.
You know what I mean? That's what we could afford. And I just think that there's a little bit of entitlement with some people. And again, they have that entitlement because they've been allowed to do certain things. And again, it's always going to get harder before it gets easier. So you're right, 100%, Kayla. They might, have a slew of evictions. They might have a slew of people going to tents or whatever the case may be. But in reality, why should landlords be the ones to pay for your lack of, non-payment? And it's like you said, we're not worried about those people that, unfortunately, they broke a leg and they can't go to work, or they got a terminal disease, or whatever the case may be. We're worried about those professional tenants that literally do this over and over and over again. And I know for a fact that that's what they do. They literally go from one landlord to the next and the next and the next.
Oh yeah, the Nina Willis, that
Yeah.
she's the name of like the professional tenants. And there was a gentleman who was an art collector, and he was a professional who went through the court systems in itself. And the new, like, every story that's out there, if you look up like landlord unpaid rent, Google it, and how many, and Ontario is deemed to be the worst, and how we have a landlord and tenant board that charges $186 for a filing fee, and in PEI it's free. Like, how are they providing justice for free? And then BC is the next one. And that's why we worry, because Doug Downey has been exploring, BC a lot. So we're like, don't be modeling off of what's going on in BC, because they're right behind Ontario to be the worst. And you know what? Through that meeting that I just recently had, is that you had a big investment firm, and he's like, why are my investors staying away from Ontario? I'm like, besides me telling them to stay away, I'm like, it's the RTA and the LTB. This is what is really going to hit the economy very hard when it comes down to our investors who used to invest into the province or not. And then we're going to see such a decline, not including the tariffs. And I think everyone needs to hold on and buckle up, because it's going to get a lot worse unless we're educating these landlords on what to do to make sure that they're getting the good tenants and know how to handle a problem without their emotions tied to it, and keep it not harassing. Because I just had another call this week where the landlord was getting charged with harassment because he kept calling the tenant and asking for rent.
Yeah. So on top of the fact that they owe you money, you can't even call them and ask for it.
Oh, the landlord can get in trouble for swearing at the tenant, but the tenant can't get in trouble for swearing at the landlord and threatening the landlord and threatening to burn down the place. So yeah, the pendulum has totally swung. I think a lot of people that can agree with it. I'm hoping with our partnership with Matrix Cares and their it doesn't just say just because they are like, they are they host events that cost money. This is why when I posted about this event that's coming up, if you can't come to this event, if you consider making a donation to them, because it does cost to be a part of these events that they host and to advocate the way that they are. And they have been amazing by inviting me to be a part of these discussions. And so shout out to Sean Allen again and the Matrix Crit Cares team for allowing me the opportunity and supporting our industry, because he looks at the landlords as a business. And especially being the president of the Scarborough Business Association, that's where he's like, no, the landlords are a business. Yes, it's an investment, but we're a business. And just like through COVID, the government came in and bailed a whole bunch of businesses out, the commercial, the airlines, and left these residential landlords high and dry with an eviction ban and, a forced payment plan that was temporary. And now it became a permanent thing where we're now forced to put our tenants on a payment plan. So always make sure, landlords, that you are working a payment plan and showing documentation that you're trying to just work that payment plan. How much can you pay? When do you get paid? How about you take the amount owing, divide that into 12 months, see if the tenant will agree to it. Have this documented so you can show it as evidence to show that you're trying to work with them. That way they're not so lenient at the hearing, trying to give the tenant another payment plan that they are probably not going to pay.
I know that our time is ending now, but I do want to touch on exactly what you mentioned. I feel that a lot of landlords get into the landlord game without actually understanding the rules. As a landlord, you need to take the landlord and tenant board seriously, because you need to realize that out of 100% of the power, you probably only hold 10% of those cards. So let's say when a tenant doesn't pay you on time, even if they don't pay you on time by a day, you still have to give them the adequate form, basically saying that, hey, listen, you paid late. Obviously, accumulating 5, 6, 7, 8 of those forms, you can now go to the landlord and tenant board and basically file for eviction for consistent payment of consistent late payment. Right now, I still don't think it's going to fly, but the accumulation of this and that and that and that, they're all things that are going to basically just tally up, and it would help you should you have to go to court. And these are the things that, unfortunately, because of the system that we currently have as a landlord, you cannot give a tenant any slack.
No, it has to be a business. I'm saying, hey, tenant, I know you're going to pay me on Friday, but I do have to give you this N4 application. You're collecting those N4 applications, bringing it into that N8 application. You're going to get to the hearing. You're asking for a Section 78. These are the things that, and the tenants could appeal that, but these are the step-by-step process. And you're going to learn. You're going to learn from landlords who've, didn't do the education, and they had to find out the hard way. So if you are a landlord who got taught a very hard lesson and you would like to come on here and tell your story, please send me a direct message at Kayla Andrade or olwlandlords@gmail.com. Mario, I can't thank you enough. I think you're fantastic. I think if it was if I got turned into a dude, it would be you. It would be you. I love your energy. I love your education to it. Obviously, you've been a landlord for the last 19 years. I've been now 23 years being a landlord, and 15 years being a housing advocate. And I wouldn't be able to do it without the support of this community, even though I have to figure out how to pay for the StreamYard as it renews on April 7th. So,
well, listen, Kayla, I actually have to say, on behalf of landlords, we thank you. So for everybody that's watching at home, this is actually my second time ever talking to Kayla. We connected about a month ago, and just the energy was amazing. And I'm so happy that we have somebody kind of advocating for landlords, because nobody is doing so. People are quick to complain, and they tell a buddy, hey, this is what happened to me, this is my experience, or you'll hear a realtor or somebody else talking about it, but nobody's actually really doing something, and you are. So we need more people like you. And I'm just, like I said, I speak on behalf of all landlords when we say thank you, because without people like you, nothing is going to ever change.
Mary, you got me on camera. I'm going to be blushing. I'm trying not to God, thank you.
No, I sincerely mean it. And again, it's just unfortunate what's happening, because there's a lot of good people on the landlord and tenant board side who are really losing out by these just outdated rules that we have. And hopefully they can change soon for the better, for the greater good of everybody, right?
Well, I think Mario, with your support and Major Cares here and people understanding that, when I first started, it was a raw landlord having our protest. It was great to bring that media's attention to gain more landlords. And I've always had a city councilor who said that to win the battle, you win the battle. To win the war, you need warriors, right? So my
Yes.
goal is to constantly meet as many landlords as I possibly can, get on many podcasts as I can to get that voice out there to say, this is what our system is. This is how it's broken. This is how we need to change it. And we just need to make sure that we're connecting with the elected officials and getting more people. It doesn't really do justice just having one Kayla,
Yeah.
advocating for us. We need to start using our social media power, getting that message out there. And I think media is doing that as well. And our elected officials are doing that as well, because they know it needs to be rewritten, overhauled, and we want to be at that table when it happens. And we do have that opportunity. So please, everyone, check into the April 28th to April 29th roundtable discussion that is going to be happening with our elected officials. I want to continue to keep supporting you guys through your troubling times, because I love it as almost like a challenge whenever I can do to help you, even helping our landlord on the CTV statement, trying to figure out where everything went wrong and trying to help him get some more eyes on his story. So Mario, do you have any last advice that you want to give our viewers? Because I'm sure we're going to be having you on again, because there's something that you and I have been brainstorming about. We just have to wait till
Yes.
June until we can get it off the ground.
My biggest advice to any landlord, I know that sometimes it's difficult having a vacant house or apartment or unit, but sometimes you're better off, let's say, leaving that unit vacant for another month or 2 months to find the right tenant. I've seen so many times before, landlords, they don't want to lose that month and have to pay for the mortgage out of their pocket. They're quick to put a tenant in there who's a bad tenant. Lo and behold, 5-6 months later, they have a problem, and then they don't pay you for over a year. I've seen it countless times. So my advice would be, if you need to have your place vacant for a month or 2 months, do it. You'll be thanking yourself in the long run, because if you get a solid tenant in there, basically the investment will pay for itself.
Well said. Well said. So, and my tip of advice is, you are bored, please get on the Landlord and Tenant Board website. Check out every single form on how to fill it out, when you should fill it out. You think it's just one form, it's multiple forms, and you got to connect these little pieces together.
Yes.
And please, for the sake of our industry, for the sake of every landlord that has ever had a professional tenant out there, please do monthly rent reporting and or former rent reporting. And please, whatever you're doing, do your own credit checks. I talked to a lot of landlords. You're not doing it. So please, I want to advocate for you, but I need to make sure you're doing what we all should be doing. So Mario, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.
Your support. We will have Mario on again soon. And if you have any questions after this is done via live, please don't hesitate to give us a comment or reach out to either Mario or myself. Happy renting.